You know it, I know it. I've spoken about this on a number of occasions now, but when it comes to sort of reforming our politics, especially here in the UK, don't get me wrong. I think reforming Westminster, changing the voting system to a PR system, great. Agree with it. Couldn't agree more. However, I think, and I always say this whenever this comes up, I am still a really firm believer that the first thing we've got to go after is the House of Lords. And I think until you reform the House of Lords and you turn that into an actual democratic body that has, people voted in, and I've often described, well, how would you do this? Well, I would call it a House of Regional Representatives, where you sort of split up all the regions and they all get sort of, the exact same sort of members. And then these members are elected by PR. So then you would probably get, let's say for Yorkshire, you'd probably get, if let's say Yorkshire was 5, let's say you would probably get, I don't know, 3 Labour, maybe 1 Conservative, and then maybe 1 Lib Dem. And maybe that's Yorkshire. Like I say, I'm not 100% sure how you would sort of do the system, but, it's an example. So, don't, shoot the messenger. But like I say, that's just an example of something I'd like to see. And I think that would make certainly our politics a lot better. I think it would make people pay certainly a lot more attention to the House of Lords. I think that once you then get that done, then as people see more and more, well, actually, PR has really worked for the House of Lords. Why then not do this then for selecting MPs? And I think when you get that, you would again see a big improvement, of course, not only just in sort of the House of Lords, because as we've said before, if you think the Tories are corrupt now, wait until you look at some of the stuff that goes on in the House of Lords on a weekly basis. Trust me, the Tories make what goes on in the House of Lords look like absolute child's play and an absolute bunch of angels compared to some of the people in the House of Lords. So, trust me, this is something that really needs to be reformed. However, interesting point put forward, and I don't know if they would actually ever consider this, but you had Jonathan Gillis, the MP for Stoke-on-Trent North, said recently that Rishi Sunak should consider putting Nigel Farage into the House of Lords. And we've had a talk about this because this has been a conversation that's been happening for quite a while. Should Nigel Farage be welcomed back into the Conservative Party? Should he put an application forward? And of course, well, with that would come all kinds of, well, strange, probably who knows what could happen. But of course, there is a difference between, of course, Nigel Farage being a member of the Conservative Party and then, of course, actually standing as an MP. Those two things are completely different. But Rishi Sunak sort of making a compromise, putting him into the House of Lords, to which this guy, and we'll read his quote in a minute, said would be an asset to Rishi Sunak. We'll go over some of those quotes, some of his comments that he said, and why maybe that might not be the best thing to do. But ultimately, if this did happen, well, oh boy, we need to reform the House of Lords because we need to get Nigel the heck out of there, as well as the rest of the absolute rump that is in the House of Lords. But before we go talking more about this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and one donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much for all those people who do help and support the channel. And of course, there's the YouTube thank you button and the Pony Club down below as well, which you can join also. So let's get on into this. And this comes from this one comes in politics.co.uk, but Jonathan Gills is quoted here when he was on GB News suggesting this idea. So this is what he said of him. He said that he would be an asset across the blue and the red wall. So Gillis said, "I'd love to see it personally." He said, "I think Nigel has a lot to offer. Number one, He's a big voice on key issues like immigration that we know are a huge number one, if not the number two issue for Conservative voters, particularly those in 2019 and particularly those in the Red War. Well, here's the thing. If you haven't looked at, because I don't think Jonathan Gillis here has really looked at voter intentions currently at the moment, immigration rapidly fallen off a cliff when it comes to people's voting intentions and how they intend to vote at the next general election. Immigration is really only an issue in the Conservative Party, and even then, it really seems to be quite a fringe populist issue. And when you really talk to people, and I've said this before, when you really talk to people about immigration, I've done a whole video on this. When you talk to people about immigration, it's never really immigration that's the problem. It always comes down to housing, opportunities, investment in local areas. And then that's not even before you actually talk about the asylum system, which the Conservatives have on purpose broken to try and keep this idea that, oh, immigration is a problem and we're the only party that can fix it. Well, they've broken a system so badly and continuing to just double on down on ridiculous policy after ridiculous policy after ridiculous policy. Remember, we're meant to be waiting for the Rwanda Plan 2.0 that's meant to be making its appearance some point this week. Wouldn't surprise me if it is on Wednesday or Thursday to try and maybe take the heat off some of, well, what is probably going to be the embarrassing Boris Johnson in front of the COVID inquiry. Wouldn't surprise me if that's when it came out. But yeah, not really a big as issue as this guy tends to claim. And we are now out of the EU, which, remember, people like this guy would have said, oh, that's the problem for all our immigration woes. Well, we're now out of the EU. You can't blame it on the EU when we're out of it. And as we said a long time ago, these guys would continue to blame the exact same issues, just you can't blame it on the EU anymore now. And that's what a lot of these guys, I think, are realizing, because you want the problem of immigration, it's nothing to do with the EU, it's to do with the current government. And that would be the Tory government, who have broken the asylum system well and truly completely. And bear in mind, Nigel Farage does not offer any concrete solutions like, oh, this guy would be an asset. He talks a lot about current issues. Nigel Farage just talks about immigration being a problem, but never, ever have I once heard him real offer any solutions. He said once used to say, oh, if we did a points-based system like Australia did, that would be fine. Well, guess what? We've pretty much got that point-based immigration system that he said would be a good improvement to the immigration system. Doesn't seem to be really helping the immigration system. Not only that, James Cleverly came out with his new 5 points to help solve immigration. Not only are those going to cause huge problems to UK employers who really, really need, those skilled laborers from abroad, it's going to cause other problems in our economy as well. It will always have a knock-on effect. We haven't really talked too much about those 5 policies because, well, to be honest, I think they're quite non-starters when they come to it. And like I say, eventually there's going to be a lot of, shall we say, businessmen approach James Cleverly and say, do not do that. And James Cleverly will go, okay, I won't do that. So, yeah, 5 pledges. Yeah, expect them to slowly, as always, disappear slowly into the background. But what else did he have to say? What's his second point on why you think Nigel Farage would be good? So, secondly, he said, I think he's actually an asset across the blue and red wall. He's able to communicate in a way that many politicians aren't able to. There is probably no one closer to having the ability other than Boris Johnson to be able to get a message across clearly and concisely. Well, congratulations. Nigel Farage has had a lot of media training. And one thing you will see very, very closely is Farage. There is not a lot of footage of shall we say, Farage meeting the people. Because whenever Farage did meet people, it's always in a very, very closely confined environment. Even if at the conference he had his shadowers and people round him shepherding him away every so often, he's not really that good. He knows how to divert an awkward question and make it seem like, he's given an answer when he really hasn't. Farage is sort of a master at this. And what Farage really is he is a big complainer. That's all he is. He is to quote Alex Jones, the turd in the punch bowl, as he once said about David Icke. But that's essentially what Farage always is. He will just be the consummate complainer, the consummate, you're doing this really badly, and not really offer any concrete solutions. Anyway, let's see what he had to say. So I really do hope that he comes forward and joins. I'd be very happy to welcome him. He said, we really need to deliver on the tens of thousands, and maybe, just maybe, the Conservatives could put Nigel Farage in the House of Lords. I think it would take. I think he would take no nonsense. He would take no prisoners. He would call out the civil service for what they are at times, which they are blockers to the actual government policy, and make sure we deliver on our priorities for the British people. Yeah, this is something else we've seen as well. Tories completely ignoring what the civil service are. Because here's the thing, the civil service do what the politicians tell them to, or in this case, what, the Minister of the Foreign Office, the other Minister for Home Affairs, the DEFRA Minister, the Timmy Badnock as Business Minister, they take their lead from them. But there are times when the civil service will go to those particular ministers and say, hey, we can't actually do that because, well, that might be breaking international law, or there's this other law that we can't do because of this, or hey, remember that, withdrawal agreement you signed with the EU, it sort of breaks that. So we can't really do what you're asking us to do. It's not that they are blockers, they are being asked to do things which they know they cannot do. And that's what frustrates the Conservatives, because you have, these civil servants who come forward and say, hey, we can't do that. And you will have noticed over the past couple of years, this increased hatred by the Conservatives against the civil service. But once again, what are the Conservatives offering to help the civil service or make the civil service not blockers? Well, according to Jacob Rees-Mogg, they just needed to get back into the office and, work in offices more. And I don't see Nigel Farage's solution working either, which his solution, by the way, is to cut tens of thousands of civil servants, making departments even less staffed than they already are now, thanks to austerity. So, this guy thinks, putting Nigel Farage would be a good idea. We really would not be a good idea. If anything, it would give him legitimacy, and especially against the Conservatives, because what has Nigel Farage made a career out of? He has made a career out of criticizing the Conservatives consistently every single time. That's what his career has been. Attacking the Conservatives and pushing them ever further towards the right. Because he did not like that David Cameron came in and sort of dragged the Conservative Party a bit towards the centrist. Even people like Michael Gove, who are not fully centrists, didn't like how far centrist they had been pulled by David Cameron. And, people like Nigel Farage want them to go really far right. So, yeah, it would not be a good idea because ultimately all he would do, it would be to continue to attack the Conservative Party. And also, it's bearing in mind, we are actually seeing actually, no, we'll talk about that in another video, about Reform UK and how they're performing in the polls. But yeah, doing this would be a bad idea. It would be a bad idea for Rishi Sunak to sort of make him a lord. Um, it would give you yet another, uh, well, problem in Rishi Sunak, essentially. And of course, just as you've seen, if you need a minister, you can pull from the House of Lords. And as we said before, will the Conservatives get so desperate they would employ Nigel Farage? I doubt they would. And but the bright line on that would be it would be absolutely awful. It would be horrendous, and he would make an absolute shambles of it because he's got no real solutions to any political problems that the UK currently faces, other than just to complain about them. Um, what would eventually happen? It would be, as we said, it would be an absolute shambles. It would be a disaster. He would blame someone else, probably even the civil service. Um, but ultimately, it would prove that Farage is no better than your average Tory. He's no better than Suella Braverman. He's no better than Priti Patel. He may even be worse, for all we know, than Liz Truss if he was actually given any proper political power, or the ability, or at least put in charge of the levers of power. He would be an absolute disaster, and that would really show him up for what he is. He's just an absolute egotistical toff. Like I say, we saw all the Coots banking scenario. That was him just throwing his toys out of the pram because he'd been denied a very privileged bank account because he didn't have the money anymore for that. Yeah, this, as I said at the beginning, could maybe be a compromise that Rishi Sunak ends up um, having to do, maybe to sort of please the right more. This maybe sort of take Nigel Farage out of the playing field potentially at the next election. Well, put him in the House of Lords. But if you do that, you give him an even larger platform, um, and all he's going to do is go after Rishi constantly and the rest of the Tories on their failings, and just talk about problems, but not really offer any solutions on that front. Um, Will this actually happen? Again, possibility. Who knows? Depends how much pressure, depends how much, force gets pushed on Rishi Sunak. Like I say, he's just lost in the Commons, the first time he's actually lost, um, just recently. Um, but we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. But yeah, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that, if we've said before, if the Tories get desperate, they might do a deal with Nigel Farage. And that deal might be, we'll put you in the House of Lords if you support us. Will Farage do that? Don't think he will, but he might do it just to get ennobled, because after he gets ennobled, not like anyone can take it away from him. Which again, big problem in the House of Lords, which is also why we need to reform it. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all the people who do help and support the channel. Like I say, please do click on the like and share button on your way out. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.